Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sam Allred. I bring you greetings. I'm in my home office in Heber City, Utah. It's just a beautiful day. I hope that you had some opportunity to view the eclipse yesterday and that was a good experience for you. Thanks so much for joining me for this introductory webinar. It's for a program that we are rolling out called Leading Positive Change. And I truly believe you're going to find this time helpful. I'm going to go through this at a pretty good pace. And as I always do with any webinar, I always have questions at the end. So if you chat them in, I will respond to any question that you send in and make sure that I answer it in hopefully a sufficient level of detail that's helpful for you. Let me start this with just a slide to kind of set this up. At Upstream Academy, we've really been blessed to do a lot of enjoyable and exciting things with the accounting profession. It has been our thrill to do that. We have the privilege of working with just over 400 accounting firms on a regular basis across North America. And as it said, we see in all of them a desire to change, to improve, to get better. Certainly some firms make better progress at changing and improving than do other firms. And I've known and associated with hundreds of leaders in our profession, and some probably just given their nature are more impactful than others over the past 3 decades. This is my 32nd year in the profession. And one thing is, looking back, I've learned an important lesson about what the most reliable indicator of effective leadership is, and I've really come to understand it's the ability to create positive results. I was visiting with 2 or 3 managing partners that are in a very, very progressive group that we've gotten together, and I would put them amongst the best firms, the best 7 firms in our profession, and we meet together on a regular basis, and the discussions are always exciting and exhilarating and challenging. And we were planning an upcoming retreat, and a comment that one of them made that just really kind of stopped us in our tracks and helped us really think deeply about where we are right now in our profession. He said, in the next 10 years, it's quite possible that the most successful firms will be the ones that look the least like what they look right now. And that was just an interesting statement that then drove a whole different discussion about that need for change. But that's really what I want to focus on for the next 25, 30 minutes or so, is just why this is such an incredibly important topic, maybe now, as it's always been, but now more than ever. Change in any firm, at any level, with any initiative, is just difficult. Just ask anyone who's ever tried to lead it, and we all get that. I always find the data, or the research, the findings to be truly sobering. Studies show that 70% of all change efforts fail to some extent, either outright failure to at least enough failure to help us say to ourselves, we missed the mark, we didn't get done what we wanted to do. And for most leaders, that's not an impressive track record. If you think about it, almost every single initiative begins with this great anticipation of what we're going to do and what we're going to get, and somewhere along the way, that excitement turns to frustration, and we see more failure than we see success with our change efforts and our change initiatives. And in most firms, that's repeated on some frequent basis over and over again. And so consider the impact that failure rate has, a 70% failure rate, on every member of the firm and collectively on the firm's culture. So here's what I think is truly amazing to understand is I've spent a lot of time with, and I'll introduce him in just a minute, Gordon Crater, a dear friend who's recently stepped down from serving as the managing partner of Plant Moran. And he and I have been friends for decades and have always talked about working together on something, and we're very excited about working on this together. As we really studied this, I'll tell you what became the most shocking thing to us. We looked at 50 common change initiatives within our profession and have found that almost with every one of them, very few exceptions, they've had a high rate of failure. Here's what shocked us the most. In many cases, and probably even most cases, the strategy behind the change is completely sound, and the change vision is the best thing for the firm and its people. In other words, you're often focused on the right thing for the right reason at the right time, but why then is there so much failure? If you're choosing the right things and they're going to benefit everybody and the timing is just right to do it, why then do we have such a high rate of failure? Why do 70% of change initiatives fail? And I'd ask you to listen, pay close attention to the next 3 slides or so, because this has really been the biggest part of our finding. The majority of the failures, more than 70%, were due to employee resistance to the change and our leadership behavior that just didn't support the change or isn't committed to whatever the change was going to be. In other words, most change failures, more than 70%, are not process failures, they're people failures. In other words, they're not about having the wrong steps and the steps not being well thought out. Regardless of how well thought out the process is, it's people that are circumventing the success of the change initiatives, not the steps that we're trying to follow. So here's kind of the root cause of most change initiative failures. And I've kind of summarized it in 4 bullets. It's a bit more than this, but this is a pretty good summary. Firm members at all levels who are securely anchored to the status quo. They're vested in keeping things the same. Or firm leaders who give grudging compliance rather than spirited commitment to change initiatives. Do it because you have to. Negative obedience is always weak leadership, and we see way too much of that when it comes to change initiatives. A firm culture that keeps individuals from voicing their concerns and engaging in open, honest dialogue. In other words, what we've talked about for a long time, way too much artificial harmony, that may be one of the biggest killers of change initiatives. And a culture that fosters a genuine fear of failure and doesn't acknowledge that mistakes are things that can be good and that we can gain knowledge from them. Mistakes are the tuition we pay to gain invaluable experience. That's a phrase I hear Gordon say all the time. And whenever you have artificial harmony, you have a genuine fear of failure. Whenever you have something less than open, honest dialogue, you always have a genuine fear of failure. And again, as I mentioned, Gordon and I studied just at 50. In fact, we've listed them in the workbook, the studies that we did on 50 common change initiatives within our profession that have had a high rate of failure. And in most cases, again, the strategy behind the change is sound, and the firm and its people would benefit from making the change. So let me focus on just one of those 50, one example to better understand what's really happening. And I'm going to look at an example that's just really common across our profession and analyze why it fails. Almost every firm in North America has tried to implement a plan to get rid of their worst clients, clients that we commonly refer to as D-level clients. And leaders of firms have said for years that the goal that they had and the effort that they made to try to remove those D-level clients has been, for the most part, somewhat of a failure, all the way to a complete failure. So why? And follow along with me here as I walk through this. The change initiative makes complete business sense for just a host of reasons. I list 4. This is not meant to be exhaustive. It's just the 4 most obvious reasons. The exhaustive list would be much bigger than this, but here's 4 obvious reasons. Hey, these clients put a pit in everybody's stomach that has to deal with them. Almost everyone dislikes the experience. The clients undervalue our services. They treat every invoice that we send them like an invitation to a debate, and that causes reluctance to record and bill the time spent on their behalf. They live in what Stephen R. Covey identifies as quadrant 1, where everything is urgent and important, and they literally require anyone that serves them to get into that same quadrant, and that wears us out. Actually, for that reason alone is why I don't work with D-level clients, period. I don't want to get back in quadrant 1. I was there for a while. I don't want to get back. You can't avoid it, by the way, if you work with D-level clients. And then number 4, they're demanding, and often they're high risk. They're always cutting corners. They're willing to throw others under the bus and play the blame game and so on. So again, for a host of reasons, it makes sense to remove the worst clients from your firm, these D-level clients. So if it makes good business sense to remove a D-level client, and it would be in the firm's best interest to do so, why have most change efforts in this area failed? And this is so important to understand. Too often, firms focus almost all their efforts on the process needed to bring about the change initiative and spend too little effort on the people side of the issue. That's what's really been the biggest aha moment for Gordon and I as we've worked on this and developed this. Think about the steps most firms take to get rid of their worst clients. They're logical steps. Management believes in the initiative. It makes perfect sense to them, and by the way, there's never a change initiative without a strong belief on the part of management. Management convinces partners to accept the change initiative. There's often great effort to help partners see the wisdom behind the initiative. The criteria for A through D level clients is developed, and the criteria is applied to all clients, and partners are expected to fire their D-level clients, and usually they're given a reasonable period of time to get them off the, I always say, get them off the firm's island. But ultimately, there's few bus stops for the bad clients. Now, you could add a few extra steps for some firms, but the point I want to make is that for the most part, the steps are logical. They make sense. The process is sound. So here's really what the takeaway is. If you look only at the process, you're going to follow the steps you need to take and the communication you need to have to ensure that everybody understands those steps. You may fail to help your partners and the rank and file of your firm see the why, what, and how of the change. Firms often fail to enlist and ensure their help and don't provide the training needed to help people make the change. And we got to spend way more emphasis here because this has been the area that has killed change. So here's the key principle to understand. When focusing on successful change initiatives, place equal emphasis on process, which are really the steps we're going to follow to get from point A to point B, to move the dial or needle, as we say, and behavior, how people behave in pursuit of the results. Both are vitally important. That's been probably the biggest thing we've understood in the last 8 to 10 months as we've worked on this, has really been that understanding. Why do change initiatives fail? It's because we're spending too much time on what the steps we're going to follow, and we look and say, boy, those are logical, and we know this is good for the firm, and we're not spending enough time to understand the behavior side of it, because it's the behavior side that has killed 70%, over 70% of the change initiatives have been the behavior side of things. Now, if the previous slides have any kind of a familiar chord with you, and they seem somewhat too familiar in your firm, if as Yogi Berra would say, it feels like deja vu all over again, then I want you to understand that we believe that we can help you improve the change initiatives and the success of those initiatives within your firm, and that's really why we've developed this program, why we've partnered with CPAmerica members to be able to do that, why we're excited to do that. Let me kind of describe what's really behind that. The primary purpose and focus of this Upstream program is to help you achieve better results by teaching you how to lead positive change within your firm, how to significantly improve the results of your change initiatives at all levels. Again, let me go back to what that managing partner said that really hasn't left my mind since he said it. It's entirely possible that the most successful firms in 10 years will be those that look the least like what they look today with the changes that are coming. We have a lot of change we can't ignore, change we can't just put our head in the sand and think we're going to be just fine. So our focus is to help you to significantly improve the results of your change initiatives at all levels. So let me give you a concise overview of the program. It's a 3-day workshop. It's really going to effectively be really 2.5-day workshop. It's going to be held on December 5th, 6th, and 7th later this year at Harper and Pearson's office in Houston, Texas. We will have a follow-up session the following May 24th. In other words, we believe that it will be helpful to give all the participants a chance to go implement what we have worked on in this workshop, and then have an opportunity to come back together in a complete open and honest dialogue and say what worked, what didn't, what additional help is needed, or whatever. And we want to make sure that that's provided. So that's part of this on May 24th, 2018. The class size will be limited to 50 participants. It is going to be workshop. We're going to be putting them to work. We anticipate that those participants that come will be in either currently serving in leadership, significant leadership roles, or being trained. And here's kind of what we think. We anticipate that those who attend the workshop will either be managing partners or CEOs, or they'll serve on either the EC or management committee or the board of directors within the firm. They'll either be in charge of offices or service lines or segment or industry groups or whatever. In other words, those in the firm who have the responsibility to lead change. That's who we anticipate will be participating in this particular workshop. And then here's the key elements. I'm going to take a few minutes and walk through each of these 6 key elements. Let me just start with the very first one, the instructors, myself and Gordon Crater. You're probably very familiar at this point, hopefully not fearfully so, with myself, because I participated with CPAmerica for years. So I'll focus less on myself. I love to do instruction. I love this. This has probably been the most exciting thing I've ever worked on, and I'm having fun in more or less the twilight of my career. I'm having a whole lot of fun with this. Gordon Crater and I have been friends for 20 years. I can honestly say there's nobody else in the profession I probably respect more than him. He is a seasoned leader. He is a true, consummate professional. He is extremely approachable. He has led, in my opinion, one of the very best firms in our profession, and he has been incredibly successful in creating, in a very large firm, which is no small thing, the culture of change, a culture where people embrace change. And they have changed as much or more than about any firm I know for the better, and do so consistently. And so as we talked about what we wanted to do, knowing that he was stepping down at the end of July, we started this again late last year, this process of wanting to work together and carving out what we were going to do. And can honestly say we're just like 4-year-olds on Christmas Eve about what we get to do with this. We're pretty excited about it and the effect we believe it's going to have. We're going to take a very holistic approach to change. Teach a process that takes the guesswork out of, we approach it from beginning to end, a process that leans heavily on the people side of the change process. More on that to follow. I'll come back to that in just a minute. We sent out a brochure, attached it to the mailings that went out to you. That brochure, one of the things that was in that was this agenda. Let me take just a minute and add some depth to this, if I could. First of all, you'll notice for each day we do change the seating. We're going to mix people up. We're going to seat you in teams. There'll be 50 people. We'll seat you in teams so that you can work on things with different seating assignments and different team members throughout the 3 days. After we have the welcome and introductions, then we're going to discuss right up front the 10 key principles of effective change. I'll discuss more about that in an upcoming slide. We're going to take a deep dive into the question, why do most change efforts fail? What I've just kind of briefed over very quickly, we're going to take a pretty deep dive and really look at, using a number of different examples, why do change efforts fail, like, especially given that they're the right thing at the right time, they'll benefit everybody. Why did they fail? We're really going to look at that. And then we're going to discuss the best way to create a culture for change. Probably one, Gordon brings a lot to this in so many different aspects, but one of the things he brings uniquely is he has created within Plant Moran a culture of change. So we will really take in depth and talk about what do you need to do to really create within your firm a culture where people want to change, not resist it. Now, we're not trying to say and be Pollyannish and say, boy, everybody from that point on will look for any change and want to do it. We're not saying that. But how do you create a culture where people will understand the value of it and lean towards it and be prepared to do the things they need to do to bring it to pass rather than kill it? Again, over 70% of the kills for change failures come from the people side of things. How do you develop and enable change agents? Nothing changes without a catalyst of some kind. We'll take an in-depth look at that. How do you measure change? What really constitutes for any kind of change initiative, whether it's objective or especially subjective? How do you identify what constitutes a moving needle so you can measure it? Everybody can measure it. And then in the afternoon of day one, we will go to work. After lunch, we're going to focus on the change process I showed in the previous slide. Every team is each team will select a case study. There's 50 problems in the back of the workbook. They'll pick the one they want or make one up. We're okay with that. There are 50 problems common to our profession, and we'll walk through the change process to develop and present an action plan. So each team will pick the change initiative they want to take on, meaning every team may have a different one, and they'll go through that change process to develop and present an action plan, and then be able to present that to everyone else and get feedback from the participants and go back and work on that plan. We will actually do that twice throughout the workshop, at the end of day one in the afternoon, also day two in the afternoon on a different team seating. Day two, we're going to start with the most challenging resistance to change, which is the danger of passive resistors. And we'll talk about how to identify that, what to do about it. We'll talk about how to select what to change, what to focus on. I think one of the biggest mistakes is we try to do, again, too much. So how do we survey large fields and really cultivate small ones and pick the right thing to change? How much change can one firm handle? We'll talk about the proper pace. One of the biggest mistakes otherwise good leaders make is, again, taking on too many change initiatives, and then they try to move too many dials at one time and see a lot of failure with that. We'll talk in great depth about how do you communicate the change initiative before, during, and after, and why that's so important. And then, as I said, in the afternoon of day two, we'll do the second round with a different team seating, taking on a major change initiative and walking through that change process in order to understand how to involve people and avoid from having the people side of things kill it. Day three, we're going to take the last step in the change process, which is really disciplined execution. Too many firms probably are guilty of setting uphill goals but having downhill discipline, and we're going to talk about the discipline that's needed. And we always call that gentle pressure relentlessly applied. It's one of those 10 principles, 10 key principles of effective change. We're going to talk about that in depth. We're going to talk about the importance of celebrating change. Celebrating positive change is a tool for cultivating a success mindset. When you notice and celebrate positive change, then all the team members start to see the firm as being successful rather than trying to be successful. That's really important to understand. We will talk about that. And then I've asked Gordon to work with me and identify together the top changes that firms really need to make. There's a lot that we want to make. I get that. That'll be important to all of us. But there are certain things that are happening right now in our profession that if we want to be successful in 10 years, there are certain changes we just have to make. If we're going to thrive in the future, we're going to discuss each one of those and then offer some closing thoughts. at the end. As we'll do with all of our workshops, we will take notes in that. I've mentioned that it's highly interactive. We'll use a lot of real-world scenarios and case studies and peer-to-peer sharing and all the things that you'd expect in an interactive workshop. There'll be a lot of networking. Teams will be allowed to select the exercises and the problems they want to work on, and they'll prepare action plans and so on. An important part of effective change is really understanding some key principles. And as I mentioned here, we see a principle as a tenet, an anchor, something that doesn't change, something that always guides you, an enduring truth you can use as a guide in making decisions. Good things consistently happen when correct principles are followed. These principles do not change. That's why they're so important to understand. And Gordon and I have worked together through our experience to identify 10 key principles of change that we will talk about and start the workshop with. Surveying large fields, cultivating small ones, having success early and building on it, not expecting immediate buy-in and the reasons behind that. The fact that if you learn how to measure what you're doing, you get to celebrate the progress towards it, how to really create a robust communication plan and why it's so important to do that, how to avoid the strategy of hope when it comes to change initiatives. Remember, the fish stinks from the head is a key principle that ties to leadership and a role that every leader has with change and that they need to vitally understand. Apply gentle, relentless pressure as that discipline that I talked about that will be the thing that we discussed last on the third day. Identify and enlist the influencers. The importance of recognizing how nothing changes without a catalyst and why it's so important to us that we're regularly identifying and enlisting those individuals that will be our influencers for change. And then last of all, a warning, beware of unintended consequences. Lots of stories that we have when somebody really didn't think through a change initiative and what kind of came back to bite them as a result. We'll talk about how you can beware of unintended consequences as you go through this process of leading positive change. You know Upstream by now to know that everything we do is unconditionally guaranteed. This is the wording on the website that we completely stand behind. If you are not completely satisfied, we will at your option either waive your fee or accept that portion of the fee that reflects your level of satisfaction. We've always believed that that's something that when we started 15 years ago, Upstream Academy, that's been there the entire 15 years. Our team feels very strong about that. And then as you would expect, there's CPE. We anticipate probably somewhere around 22 credits for the workshop, the 2.5-day workshop. And then there's a follow-up on the following 6 months or so. The investment for each participant to attend the workshop is $3,000. That may sound like a lot. We really have looked at this, and if you've ever participated in anything that's Harvard related, that's really been Gordon and I's experience, and we feel like this is every bit the level of what they offer there for a whole lot less money and very specific to our profession. So we're excited about what we believe the investment can mean for each firm in terms of the benefit they get out of it. And then I just kind of close with this thought. We love to help firms and individuals in our profession get better. We've established a very successful track record in helping firms get better, and we're confident that this leading positive change workshop will help your firm make significant measurable progress on that path to improvement, in getting better at how you have success in all of your change initiatives. So with that, let me go with the questions. I'm going to take a couple that I have come in. If you have any that you want to just chat them in, they'll show up on my screen, and I'll take those as well. Just a couple. Would it be appropriate to have a firm administrator attend? Yeah, any leader that has a responsibility. We weren't in that slide. I don't remember exactly which slide that was. So slide number 4 or 5 or whatever. or maybe a little bit later. We weren't trying to say here's the only limits of who can come. We were trying to anticipate who we see in leadership seats. So each of your firms is different, and you may have somebody. You might have a COO, and I don't know if that was mentioned in that slide, and so on. So whoever you feel like is in a leadership seat that has a responsibility to lead effective change would be an appropriate person. Will there be any prerequisite work required for this workshop? There will be. It won't be a lot. There are some articles right now that we really, really like, and we're sifting through those to try to determine what do we really need to make a prerequisite. So it will not be books that you read, but there may be some articles. For sure there'll be one. Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, gave a speech called Day 2. That is as relevant to what we're going through as a profession as anything, or it should be. And it's also very forward thinking. So that is an example of one of the pieces that we'll be sending out to those that register and ask them to read that so that we can have some discussion of that when we get together. Again, it'll be some articles. It won't be books or things like that. Third question. If you were to pick a couple of people to send to this program, would you send the people who have demonstrated the most skill at changing culture, or the people who have been more of a boat anchor to change? I'm tempted to give a flippant answer, and I probably shouldn't do that. My flippant answer would have been fire the boat anchors and bring the rest. But that's probably more in line with what I'm thinking. I've never, ever in my life wanted to do a workshop where you have prisoners, people that don't want to be there. We get out of things what we put into them and what we bring to them. So I would say probably bring the people that have demonstrated some skill, and we'll add to that skill significantly. You'll continue to rely upon those people. I don't know if this is necessarily a bring the doubting Thomas and we'll try to convince them this is what we need to do. Not to say it maybe couldn't help them, but that's never my first choice. I always bring the people that want to see the firm change, bring the people that want to see the firm get better, that want to see it move to higher ground. We will teach them how to do that and how to do it very effectively. The last one. One issue we found is that there may be a low sense of self-awareness for team members. We view their performance at a certain level and they see it as much higher. What are your recommendations for facilitating self-awareness? As an addition to that, these folks could be change agents, but self-awareness can impede this. I'm not sure, in all honesty, that ties directly to what I'm trying to share here in terms of being a change agent. That's more in trying to have open, honest evaluations of people. But I will say this, knowing firms as I do, and I'm thinking of some that aren't necessarily in the CPAmerica membership, so please don't think I'm thinking of your firm, but I think of some I know where some people are in leadership seats and think they play a very different role than they really do, and in many cases they're obviously more of a hindrance than they are a benefit, and somehow they found their way into some leadership seat somewhere. So that would fit the model of somebody that really lacks self-awareness of how they impact other people, and that's kind of a separate topic. That's all about how do we really give them open on about honest evaluations, how do we give them course corrections to help them. I agree with the thought, many of those people, because they're driven, because I think in many cases their heart's in the right place, they could be effective change agents, but their personality often gets in the way of allowing them to be effective at much of anything, frankly, some of them. And that's kind of a different time and place, and that's not really what we're trying to teach and talk about here. That person may need some coaching and counseling or whatever. Typically, a really good, honest coach can help somebody like that make some significant changes. Those are the questions that I've seen and responded to. If you get others and I can help you in any way with those, please don't hesitate. I'd be more than happy to do that and help you in any way that I could. Best wishes to you. Have a fantastic day. Please let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.